I was 16 and about 40 pounds overweight. I've always thought that adolescent weight gain should be measured in miles because that's how it really feels. I'd say that 40 pounds puts at least 7 miles between a teenage girl and the rest of her world. Somewhere between 7 and 12 miles, I started throwing up. Not too often, but just enough to punish the fat girl who was taking over my body. I went to church camp that summer. I think this was the 4th or 5th church after the guitar player put his hand through the wall. 5 churches in 10 years? I should explain that. In church number 2, some staff guy was funneling the offering money to pay for his porn. I think he showed it to the youth. I don't remember exactly. I was a little kid. I remember it was pretty ugly. Number 3 was a smaller gig. It was a church full of country people. I got pretty close to the pastor's wife before she got tired and called it quits, left her husband and the rest of us. Number 4, the pastor was an angry little man. We didn't stay long. I think he left with the church secretary. Let's turn your hymnals to congregation number 5. I went to church camp with church number 5, and I went with a bus full of kids sitting 7 miles away from the rest of the world. Summer church camps almost always save their most dynamic speaker for the last night. It's a good strategy. The kids are already emotional after 5 days of thwarted 2-day romances, and they're sunburned, and their blood sugar is all wigged out, about 80% caffeine and vending machine sugar. After listening to the message and about an hour of music, I felt this weight, like I needed to talk to someone about what was really happening in my life. Bridge the gap, you know. Our youth minister was standing up front, so I grabbed her arm and we went to the prayer room. It was a cinder block retreat room filled with many circles of 3 folding chairs. 3 here and 3 there, you know. Adult volunteers were scattered around the floor, bent over praying with their hands on the back of crying teenagers. Teenagers who were confessing all of the stuff that teenagers did and do now and will probably continue to do in the future. I started speaking slowly, looking at the floor. I didn't want her to see my face when I told her. So I've been throwing up. I know it's stupid, and I don't know why I'm doing it. I guess it's because I'm fat, and I hate being fat, and I don't want to do it anymore. There was silence. The youth minister wasn't saying anything, but I didn't want to look up at her. I was a straight A student. At age 14, I competed in an international science competition, and by the age of 16, I had researched cancer at Berkeley. I had a reputation county-wide as a sort of geek prodigy. My freshman science project separated the corpora allata from the corpora cardioica in the 5th instar of the Manduca sexta by ligation. No joke. I had no date to homecoming, scholarships out the wazoo. I was that kind of kid. I knew her shock would be great. The prodigy is puking. But I hadn't expected the silence. I looked up, and she was crying. She was crying quiet at first, and then harder. Okay, she couldn't stop crying. Oh crap, I've broken the youth minister, I thought to myself. My bad, my bad, my bad. How stupid am I? My sin is bad enough to break the entire youth minister. She got up out of her chair and left the room mumbling, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I got on a bus the next morning and went home. A few months later it all came out. She had bulimia. The youth minister had bulimia. I'd hit a nerve. She also had some sort of issue lifting stuff out of stores. That's what they told me anyway. I'll never forget the night it all hit the church business meeting. The deacons asked the youth minister to stand, broken and exposed in front of an entire congregation. This black-haired snake of an old woman stood up from her pew and started yelling at the youth minister as she cried. They yelled at her for throwing up. They yelled at her for taking things. There she stood, my youth minister, the woman who had broken down at my own confession of the same sin, stood in the full weight of her shame, just soaking it in. her 30 lashes, and then 60, and no one stopped the yelling. I left that night knowing what the church did to people who hated themselves enough to throw up.